Good morning, everyone. My name is Russell Palashka, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Ag Marketing here at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. We want to welcome everyone to the 7th Annual Kansas Summit on Agricultural Growth. I really appreciate everybody taking their time this morning to join the feed and forage sector as we work together to grow agriculture across our great state. Although this year's main Ag Growth Summit will be in person here in Manhattan, we decided to again host some of these sector breakout sessions virtually to allow as many people across the state as possible to join. After all, your involvement is key to the success of this event and the key to the agriculture industry. The strength of Kansas agriculture comes from your hard work, your dedication, and leadership, all of which have made this state's largest industry and economic driver, agriculture. The purpose of this summit is strategic industry growth. And that requires communication, coordination, and collaboration from people just like you this morning. Thank you again for taking time out of your day this morning and being part of the effort, participating in this feed and forage session. And I now would like to turn the webinar over to our sector lead, Kim Nettleton.
Hi, Russ. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm Kim Nettleton, and I'm work for the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I'm the market reporter for the state for hay. And we are so glad that you've chosen to spend your time with us this morning. We will be focusing our next 2 hours on the Kansas feed and forage industry. The forage sector, as you well know, is a very important sector in the state's agricultural economy. Just a few statistics for you this morning. According to estimates prepared by the Kansas Department of Agriculture and based on the in-plan economic model, the estimated direct impact of forage industry in Kansas is $296.8 million in output and just over 6,490 jobs. These, including indirect induced effects, the total impact of the industry on the Kansas economy reaches $530.7 million in output and 7,870 jobs. So it's a huge economic driver in the state. Key Kansas forage production statistics include Kansas is second in sorghum silage production at 22.59% of the U.S. total. Sorghum silage production is currently 1.1 million tons, or 22.6% of the U.S. total. Fourth in all hay production at 5.78 million tons, or 4.8% of the U.S. total. We are ninth in feeds and fodder export at $235.2 million, and corn silage production as of 2018 was 4.9 million tons, 3.5% of the U.S. total. So the vision of our agency is to provide an ideal environment for long-term sustainable agriculture, prosperity, and statewide economic growth. And our summit sector sessions provide the platform to help entertain opportunities and barriers to agricultural industry growth for our state. So before we get started, I do want to just give you a few little housekeeping items. At this point, we're probably all professionals at Zoom, but a couple of things during the presentation portion of the session, all participant microphones will need to be muted. If you keep it muted, and they will be muted by the host. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit those questions in the chat. And then the host will grant permission to unmute your microphone after the presentation portion of the session. We encourage everyone to contribute to the discussion. At any time during the session, when asking questions, please include your name, your city, and your organization if applicable. And lastly, this session is being recorded and will be posted online. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jerry Gano, and I will let him introduce himself, and he's going to take it away for us today. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Kim, and appreciate Kansas Ag for participation and help in presenting this sector on feed and forage today. I'm Jerry Gano with Forage Genetics International, a premier alfalfa breeding company and distributor of alfalfa genetics across the broad area of the United States, the premier provider of those genetics. Appreciate the participants that we've had in preparing this. Obviously, Kim and Robin in preparing the raw footage that was taken. We had a very nice time together filming in Southwest Kansas. I want to thank the Plains Research Station for Forage Genetics International, David Mitzner, Jake Leal, that facilitated in having a really nice place for us to go and shoot the raw footage. And their help was immensely grateful for them to help us with that. As a part of the forage industry in Kansas for 32 years, it's been my observation that Kansas forage contributes a significant amount to the economy of the state of Kansas. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. But as with all of our ag production in the state of Kansas this year, we have faced some challenges, and some of those challenges have been significant. And so this morning, our first video is going to deal with that. And with that, we will allow the video presentation to begin. Be sure and submit your questions if you have questions or comments in the chat section of the Zoom here, and be more than happy to address those as we go along. I think that you will find opportunity for questions, and the proper time to present those is when they occur in your mind. So with that, thank you, and we'll proceed with the video.
Hello and welcome to the 2022 Kansas Governor Summit on Agricultural Growth. This is the feed and forage segment of our agricultural growth for Kansas. And today joining me is Kim Nettleton with Kansas Ag Department. She is responsible for the Haymarket News. And Kim, welcome to Southwest Kansas today, where we are videotaping this. Very important area that produces a lot of alfalfa for us in the state of Kansas. And we are on a research site, Forage Genetics International, that has developed a 21-acre pivot irrigation research site with a lot of test data that's being collected here, a lot of innovative things being looked at, and we're excited to be here today and participate in that. Also joining me is Pat Berry. Pat is with our specialist team, works with nutritionists, with dairies, with alfalfa growers throughout the United States. He has responsibility basically from New York State all the way to California and a lot of states in between. Obviously, he picked July to stop here and visit us in Kansas, where the temperature yesterday was 111 degrees. And so welcome. We give you a nice warm reception.
Thank you for that, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Gano with the Kansas Grass and Forage Council, and also with Forage Genetics International. Forage Genetics International is a premier alfalfa research company devoting a tremendous amount of effort into producing elite proprietary varieties of alfalfa. And we're privileged today to be on the farm here where the research occurs in the Plains, located just outside of Garden City, Kansas. And so we're excited today to be able to talk about some of the things that are impacting agriculture, particularly alfalfa production here in the state of Kansas, and particularly here in Southwest Kansas, which is the #1 growing area for alfalfa in the state of Kansas. So what we want to talk about today for a few moments is what has changed within this industry. And so Kim, I'll ask you first, from a state of Kansas point of view, what has changed over the past year that is impacting alfalfa hay growth acres here in the state of Kansas?
Well, first and foremost, of course, we're having a drought.
To say the least.
Unprecedented, especially on this side of the state. I don't think we've seen it this bad since the last major drought in 2011, 2012 area. And so that's having major impact on alfalfa growth this year in the state. So acres were down to begin with, and then with the drought, the cuttings are shorter, and we just aren't getting the tons of alfalfa that we would in a normal year, whatever that is these days.
Certainly.
So that's the biggest issue, I think, concerning, of course, then we'll address that later, maybe in a little bit more depth, but then just the state of affairs, the problems with logistics, the problems with trucking, the problems with labor. They've all seemed to be, this is unprecedented, and this started during the pandemic, and we just haven't been able to climb out of that. So all of that seems to be affecting the producers and how we get the alfalfa to market. So, and with all that being said, of course, then that indicate that that's going to increase those prices, especially with the small amount, I shouldn't say small amount, but with tonnages being down, demand and supply. And so, of course, those prices have really increased this year. We've seen that a lot.
So we're here in the middle of July as we are visiting right now. Are you seeing hay stocks on farm just being depleted on a continuing basis?
Yes. So what I'm hearing, and it's not just for alfalfa, but for all forages, there's very high demand. But in the last several weeks in particular, there really hasn't been a whole lot of movement reported to me. They're either stockpiling it for their own use, or they just don't have it. So as soon as they get it, it's gone. So yeah, they're just, and even driving out from Manhattan yesterday, I normally see hay piles stockpiled, and we saw very few of those yesterday. So
it's a significant thing that's occurring here in the state of Kansas. Is we're working off of depleted stocks, and here we are entering towards the latter part of our
hottest and driest part of the year, and it just is not. I wish I had good news. I'm always trying to be positive, but well, maybe. But right now it's just it's going to be a tight winter, I'm afraid, and not just for alfalfa, but I'm also hearing from producers that the brome didn't produce quite the way they wanted it. Of course, we're just getting into our prairie grass. We're halfway through, maybe, if that, and but all stocks seem to be down. Sedan, triticale, everything was down this year, and it was all directly related to what's going on with the weather.
And it certainly impacts everything that occurs in alfalfa production in particular, as well as the other forages.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Pat, in regard to what you're seeing, talk to us a little bit about hay movement across the United States, hay demand, hay production, some of the things that you've observed in your travels in the recent year.
A couple of things. Maybe we start with the West Coast, and we've got a couple phenomena there, in that the dairy herd, national herd, ebbs and flows a little bit in cow numbers, but there is a movement, kind of a migration for the dairy herd away from the West Coast here to the central part of the U.S., which does impact Kansas quite a bit.
It does.
Combine that with the some legislation that kind of favors almonds in California, which is a bit maddening for us, right, in the alfalfa industry. So not only are the cows moving, but then we've got this almond juice phenomena going on. So alfalfa acres are dropping, particularly in that California area, and what happens there is the cows come here, and then also there's a higher demand for, or a high demand for export for alfalfa. That puts pressure on the alfalfa growers here to try and produce enough for export, and which is trucking it west and getting on a ship. So that's it all impacts the whole U.S., but certainly here more so than other areas. Cows moving in, hay trying to get pushed out. Cows want to eat hay. It should stay here, right?
It should stay here, yes.
So that's what I kind of see nationally.
So in the export business, I think you would agree with me, we're seeing that demand for export hay moving further east all the time, certainly impacting Kansas hay. And some of that demand actually is for a non-GE alfalfa. What's driving that demand for non-GE?
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding worldwide and then both here locally in the U.S. Of what GE actually is. There are so many life-saving technologies that are GE driven, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry, but across everything we do in our livelihood and our lives, that GE is a benefit. But it's got this stigma to it that it's emotionally driven, and we've tried the science approach of showing how safe it is and having trust in our researchers and our approval process. But it's still, a number of times I've gone to a supermarket and like Jerry, I haven't been maced yet, but I'll go up to a young mom with a couple kids and watch them go down the dairy case and total confusion, and it's, you really can't do the education part. It's got to be an emotional part to bring that consumer back towards just whole milk and products that are safe and approved and economical, and all the variabilities that we can feed the world with. So to wrap it up, GE has just got a bad name for the wrong reasons. It's scientifically sound and life-saving process.
So I would see that there's a lot of misinformation in our culture today, and it impacts everybody, but a lot of misinformation about the products that we grow on the farm, about the technology that is available to literally feed the world.
Right.
And so it's impacting us, and so a factor there. Pat, thank you very much. Kim, thank you for your help today.
You're welcome.
Well, obviously, I have misread the agenda, and that was changes. That was first. And so I apologize for that, and we'll get into that. Do we have any questions that have been posed here? Maybe, Kim, you can help me out with reading those questions.
Yeah, so one thing that did come in was, what are you hearing about forage shortages going into the fall and winter? And so what producers have been reporting to me is it's not a rosy outlook by any stretch of the imagination. This week in particular, I had a lot of sad stories, hard luck stories this week in talking to my producers, and there just isn't going to be that much hay around at this point. At least that's what they're anticipating to feed cattle this winter. So there is a huge concern that we aren't going to have enough forage. Conversely to that, I mean, that's kind of the consensus of the producers that I talk to. And granted, I don't talk to everybody in the state, much to my chagrin, but that's kind of the consensus that's what they're telling me. Conversely to that, some thoughts have popped up this week in particular, the cattle situation. So we are beginning to see and read a lot about the cattle sell-offs in Texas because they are so desperately dry. Heartbreaking stories of producers here in Kansas that have established customers, and when they have extra hay, they'll sell it off to other people that they don't normally deal with. But these folks are calling in to hear the producers say it's so hard to turn them down when you hear a grown man cry because he's got to sell his cattle. And so that's very disheartening. It breaks your heart, but they've got their own commitments already. So that has been really hard. And then the question was posed, if we here in Kansas start to see these huge number of cattle being sold off, which I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but then all of a sudden, won't we have more hay than what we first thought? And so, which would help ease some of that. And as well as ease the price. So those are some things there that we, need to keep in the back of our minds that, yep, it looks pretty bleak right now, but things are going to change. So, and also then I'm hearing a lot of silage. So it sounds like a lot of that corn out there, maybe that didn't produce well, it's going to get cut. So that's going to add to, those feedstocks. So that's going to help. And I am also seeing a lot of grass hay, probably a lot more grass hay than I have in years, moving to those droughted areas, especially out west. So lots of that will take over. And everybody, anything that can be baled is getting baled. And I don't think that should be any big surprise to anybody. So that's kind of what we're seeing at this time. Going back to the very beginning of the question, at this time, it doesn't look very rosy for the fall and the winter, but as well as I do in this industry, it could turn on a dime, and all of a sudden everyone's doom and gloom, and then the next thing you know, we've got more hay than we know what to do with. So let's, from my mouth to God's ears.
So I have heard just recently of one fairly large dairy in southwest Kansas that is currently 4,000 ton of alfalfa short of what their needs will be for the coming year. And that's a pretty significant pile of alfalfa. I'm going to ask Kate if she would chime in, Kate Waycamp with Nutrient Ag, on what she is hearing about overall forage yield for the area that she services in southwest Kansas. Kate, we can't hear you. I'm sorry about that. We'll see if we can fix you, but your voice is not coming through at this point in time. I would just say that in all likelihood, what we are discovering in the field is a very significant shortage of production this year on particularly alfalfa and summer annuals, just because of the drought and the heat stress that has occurred. I think probably overall we're seeing somewhere around a 40% reduction from average. That would be my understanding. And so if anyone else has a comment about that, certainly be open to that. But my feel for it right now is we'll see about a 40% reduction from the average in overall forage hay production outside of the corn silage. And so as Kim has already alluded to, the corn silage is going to be a significant addition, which I think this year is going to be very, very helpful. Yeah. So any other questions, comments from those who participated, or questions from those who are participating in this session?
Jerry, I might just add that what I'm seeing in a big chunk of my territory that I'm covering is there really is none of the dry land acres have been cut at all this year for alfalfa, from basically central Nebraska all the way west. So those acres are pretty much out for the year. And then also the western, probably half of South Dakota, a lot of that area is the same way on the dry land. So that's definitely going to add to the shortage of forages this coming year. And then, much as you said, the difference even on their irrigated acres being down that 30–40%, I think is fairly accurate for most of my territory also.
Okay. Jeff Hayes is an account manager for Forage Genetics International and also participated in our videotaping. You'll see him a little bit later, but I wanted to properly introduce Jeff in regard to that. So, any other questions or comments before we move on? Well, now we will get to the challenges that I brought us to way too early. But at any rate, we had a very nice discussion on the challenges that face our industry. And I appreciate those who participated in this segment as well. And we'll go with that video at this point in time.
Joining us today is Mark Lawrence, producer for Alfalfa products here in Southwest Kansas, marketing to dairies as well as feedlots. Also Dave Mitzner, who is the overall manager of the research plots that we're visiting today. And then Pat Berry. Pat is on our specialist team that works throughout the United States talking to nutritionists, talking to growers about the value that they find in alfalfa. One of the things we want to focus on today is what are the challenges that we are facing in this industry today, perhaps that have changed a little bit over the last year. And Mark, as a grower, what challenges do you find that you're facing today that are perhaps different than they were a year or two ago?
Well, first and foremost, we're in one of the worst droughts we've had in the last 10 years, and our crops are really stressing. We're having a hard time keeping the alfalfa healthy. Just can't get enough water on, 105 degrees every day, and that's probably our first and foremost for this year. Also, with the cost of all the fertilizers, chemicals, the fungicides are hard to get a hold of. The prices of everything have doubled, if not more than doubled. Roundup's $60-some a gallon as opposed to $20-some. Even on your Roundup Ready hay, gets a little pricey trying to keep the weeds out of it. So yeah, we've had some challenges, but the hay price has been strong. The biggest issue we're going to have probably this year is our yields are going to be down substantially over our last 3 or 4 year average, and we're going to have to try and make that up somehow down the road. So hopefully the price is enough to offset it.
We trust that it will be. So I noticed that on our third cutting, production looks to be perhaps maybe 50% of a normal cutting.
Estimate. Yes.
Third cutting, and so that's going to impact the overall production for the year, I'm sure. And so certainly the drought is probably the biggest challenge.
Yes.
The increased cost of goods that you have to purchase to produce alfalfa is good there. Pat, from a perspective of a national overview, what are some of the challenges that our industry in producing forage is facing from a national standpoint?
Sure, and actually kind of a dairy perspective, Jerry, which my background is, as you know, but alfalfa competes with the row crops and that, and what we see, land is a fixed quantity, right, in the U.S. here, and the national herd does ebb and flow some. It's down a bit, but it seems to be there's always that challenge of how many tons per acre do we get, and so I run into that a lot with nutritionists trying to work with the farm managers as to how much inventory they'll have to feed the cattle, and alfalfa hangs in there pretty well, but then you factor in a lot of the growers that are supplying alfalfa to the dairies do have an option to grow a row crop. So as the prices of those increase, they have some management decisions on their own farm that may skew them to not plant quite as much alfalfa. So we see alfalfa diminishing a little bit as far as total acres, which does put a challenge because alfalfa makes an outstanding feed, particularly for dairy cattle. It just matches up really well with what we're trying to balance for nutritionally. So it's that tonnage per acre, and then the opportunity cost with growing other things for someone that is strictly a grower and not feeding cattle. So the dairymen that are buying it get a little bit strapped as far as where they could find it, and there's always a cost factor in there. But again, alfalfa hangs in there pretty well on a dairy perspective. So the challenge is more on the grower side of it for opportunity costs and tons per acre.
So seeding acres have dropped significantly in the last year.
Yeah, nationally, I think 20-25%. I think we're down in alfalfa tons or alfalfa acres, which does put quite a lot of pressure. My expertise, I don't know how much of that would be affecting the export market versus what's available to the dairy herd nationally. So far, so good. We do have a lot of herds that have lowered the alfalfa content in their diets, but there's some current research out there now that actually shows the best economics are to actually increase alfalfa in a dairy diet to about a third of the forage input. So you weigh all that, and some of the environmental concerns. Alfalfa has a lot of attributes that help us environmentally. It's quite an interesting equation to determine what you want to have on the ground and produce. And alfalfa generally wins, but you got to be pretty thorough about it.
Okay. Certainly. Thank you. David Mitzner is the manager for the farm site here for Forage Genetics International. He and his right-hand man, Jake Leal, do an extremely good job in managing this farm. David, what are some of the challenges that you face in regards to making sure that we're getting good results from the data that we're collecting here?
Well, this year, like Mark said, the biggest challenge is the drought is having an effect on it. We're fortunate here with the newer varieties, with the new disease packages, and working with that, we're trying to focus on improving the overall plant health of the plants. So you can see a difference. It really is showing up a lot more so in these stressful years, that the plants that are ready to perform are starting to hang in there.
So what about, we hear a lot about increased salt problems, both in the soil and the water, some nematode activity. How are those impacting? How are those challenging?
They're very challenging, and we at the farm here, we do some research on the salt. We do some stuff working with salt, trying to enhance the breeding side of it through our nurseries and stuff. The new disease packages are helping on a lot of that. The nematodes, we don't screen here, but another location screened, but they are showing up to be a big benefit in this area, to have that disease and the nematode package together. So I think there's going to be some really good products coming forward in the future.
And here on the farm, you're seeing some significant differences in varieties that are coming forward that have the strong disease package, the Ultra Cut.
They're really starting to show up. There's just like the plot behind us, there's a lot of variation in there, and you can see it. It's coming to the top, to the ones that have it and the ones that don't.
Okay, well, good. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your input here. Mark, do you have anything else that comes to mind that you're facing that you'd like to just see go away?
Well, you mentioned the nematodes, and one thing I will say for the competition with the row crops, the input, once you get your hay established and get your seeding up, year in and year out, it is a little cheaper to raise alfalfa than it is corn, because of especially with fertilizer prices being double. But it's just a matter of whether or not it fits into a producer's program, and fortunately for me, it does, and it's been very, very good to me. So I look at it long term. It's going to be something I'm with for many years. So.
So do you find a benefit in planting corn? I know you grow some corn behind alfalfa.
Yeah,
a benefit from the nitrogen carryover from alfalfa?
Yes, very much. The first couple of years, it's the best corn you raise, and it just fits into your rotation very well. So, and our biggest thing is year in and year out, where we cut the first cutting for the haylage for the dairy, and then the rest of the hay goes to the feed yard. We've got some opportunities. We can do different things with our crops, and it's just a very good program for us.
Good. Mark, we're looking at a lot of significant problems in this entire agricultural sector, and one of those is logistics, both getting parts and pieces in that you need, equipment in that you need for your operation, and also for shipping our products out. Can you address some of the things you're observing here in Southwest Kansas?
I've been farming for 40-some years, Jerry, and I've never seen anything like this, even back in the 70s and the 80s. Any kind of parts that you want, say it's swather parts, baler parts, net wrap, twine, you probably better get it bought early. And we run rotary heads, we need knives and skid plates, turtlebacks. We bought all those months ahead. And we've been very fortunate that any breakdowns we've had, we have been able to get parts. They may not be where you want them, and you may have to go get them, or they may have to ship them to you. And the freight cost has just went through the roof. Used to, you know, you could get your parts in a couple of days and it was a reasonable freight rate, but not anymore. It's just all gotten so expensive, and I don't know what some of these guys, how they're handling shipping their hay, as far as trying to find trucks, and then whatever the freight rate, because you're kind of at their mercy if you don't have your own trucks. And these guys, you can't blame them because they can't make a living.
Sure.
You know, with the fuel costs and the diesel and the tires. And some of these guys, I know there's going to be probably some of my competition or my neighbors, whatever you want to call them, that are going to have to quit raising hay because they don't have any help. I've been very fortunate. I've had the same crew for multiple years. I have some family members that are coming in to follow in my footsteps, so hopefully they'll take it over. But as far as having seasonal help to put up hay, it's been tough for a lot of my neighbors.
Okay. Well, thank you. And those are large concerns.
Oh, very big.
For everybody, not just for you alone, but for everybody in this ag industry. Thank you. Appreciate that input.
No problem.
Just a quick note, Mark Lawrence is the land tenant on the ground that we lease for research. It's the corner of a large full section circle of alfalfa that has been devoted to its own pivot. There's 21 acres under pivot irrigation there, and very nice. There's some ability to put some 40 separate plots out for research purposes. And so we're just privileged to have that opportunity in Southwest Kansas. I believe Kate now is able to visit with us, and I'm going to ask her if she'll go back to the previous sector and make some comments, her observations on forage production in Southwest Kansas in particular for this year.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. I think it's no surprise to anyone that yields are down overall. Triticale, I've heard anything from half of what is normal for them to, you know, only getting 3/4. It's kind of all over the board, but no matter what, it's down. And it's definitely putting some pressure in other areas. There's a lot of feed yards around here that are now calling and trying to get you to chop your corn for them, which is good opportunities, but it just shows you how desperate they're getting at the prices they're kind of putting out. So overall, pretty down. I mean, we personally run a cow-calf operation, and we went to north central Kansas to get some brome bales from our family members because it was cheaper to drive up there and get them than it was to pay the price they're going for down here in Southwest Kansas. So
amazing. I had a report earlier this week of 3x3x8s at the scale locally, headed back east, priced at $350 a ton at the scale. It was high RFQ, it was over 200 RFQ, obviously very premier product for dairy quality alfalfa, but so that's not unheard of. And there's some reports regionally of $400 a ton alfalfa currently. So the challenges of getting the tons produced certainly are there, and we've discussed that. Other questions, comments, or observations that would be shared among the group here this morning?
Well, Jerry, to piggyback on the pricing and thing, I can't keep up. Prices are changing so fast, and they're going up and up and up. I mean, just almost on a daily basis. But if you follow the hay market report, every week we see those prices continue to go up and up and up. And so the hay market report that I published on Tuesday, boom, she's out of step already after making calls this week. So, you know, next week we can expect to see those prices on that all types of hay, grass hay and alfalfa go up. And I you know, until we climb out of this, I think that's the way it's going to be. I do have a lot of producers asking me where the ceiling's going to be, and I said, you know, if we had a crystal ball, we'd all be, you know, in the tropics with a drink. But so I just don't know where it's going. I don't know where the top is.
I think one of the other challenges that we are observing currently, we're entering a time frame when late summer and fall seeded alfalfa would go into the ground. With this drought, and particularly on dryland acres, guys will not do anything until there is sufficient moisture to plant new seeded acres of alfalfa. On the irrigated, so many of these guys, what water they still have available still needs to be focused on the current crop that's out there, and water availability to get new seeded alfalfa, even on irrigation, is certainly going to be a challenge. So until we start getting some significant rainfall, and that needs to happen in the next 3 weeks for us to be able to go ahead and pursue seeding new crop, new acres of alfalfa on a larger basis than we currently can. That we're just not going to see a lot of new seeded acres go in this fall until we see that significant rainfall. Other questions or comments from our group here? Right. Checking my agenda to be sure that I'm in the right place at the right time, Kim. So, what are the changes and opportunities that our industry has seen for the past year? And that's our next segment. We'll view that clip now.
Joining us is Kate Wakehamp, Area Seed Manager for Nutrien Ag, and we appreciate her joining us today. And also Jake Leal. Jake is a farm manager here at the research site for Forage Genetics International, and we appreciate them joining us as well. Pat's joining our conversation as well. We're going to be looking today at some of the changes, some of the opportunities that are available to our industry, some of which are innovative, and some of which maybe we're advancing with the knowledge we have now. And so Jake, I'm going to start with you. Talk to us a little bit about some of the newest technology that's being utilized in research, particularly here on the farm, alfalfa research, and talk to us a little bit about drone operation.
So a big thing in the industry right now is drone technology, and it's become the standard in research to utilize drones for data collection. And it's not just for research. Farmers, producers, growers, agronomists, they can all use it. And it's as simple as finding an agronomist who can use the drone commercially and legally to either scout your plots or fly your fields. Primarily for research, we use it for data collection. We can look at all sorts of traits, height, biomass, length, distance, things like that. And it's not just in alfalfa, it's throughout the whole research industry. For producers, they can have agronomists scout their whole plot, their whole field. So a 50-acre field can be flown in a little under an hour and run through an analysis system, and they can know crop health, they can know chlorophyll to an extent, they can see if there's any hot spots, high pH, low pH, and that's just something a grower can't do in an hour and a half or so. You can't walk a 50-acre field by yourself. So it's definitely something that's become a really useful tool in the industry, and it's going to keep growing. Drones are only getting better, technology is only getting better, and the amount of data and information we're able to pull from these images, it's only growing as the years go on and technology grows. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out for and to utilize in a growing season. So it's definitely a great thing. So
awesome, and it's wonderful to know that Forage Genetics International is advancing in that segment as well, and utilizing that technology, and we're seeing growth in that area. And appreciate your involvement in that, and look forward to seeing some really good things coming out of that program. So also, Kate, as we look at what opportunities that you see from a seed provider to this industry, what are some opportunities that you think are out there that maybe we've not really considered strongly in the past that might be of consideration today?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest topics in Southwest Kansas is water. It's always going to be a discussion we have, whether it's diminishing wells, water rights. I mean, it's always first thing on our minds here. And I think the great thing that bringing alfalfa into your rotation could help is row crops. When you short them on water, they're gone. I mean, they're going to die off. Versus alfalfa, you've got the opportunity for it to go dormant. So in a year like this, where we've got a severe drought, I've got a lot of guys that have one well on 2 circles. It's watering both of them. So, you know, if we've got a circle of corn, a circle of alfalfa, we can water that corn and just make sure it stays alive and maybe short the alfalfa a little bit. So I think it's a great way to conserve water and also still be able to, you know, get your return on it as well. So, and you know, the topic of input prices is always going to be a hot topic for us, especially this year. And being able to, you know, have a little less cost input on alfalfa is super important, especially for young farmers where we might not have the capital to be putting into all these row crops that we need to. Alfalfa is something that we could really get established with. So I think those are the big opportunities.
Okay, good. And do you see the prices of commodities, particularly corn, soybeans, and grain sorghum that occurred this last spring especially, having an impact on demand for forage seed throughout your geography?
Are you talking in terms of the actual seed price or the commodity price?
So the actual seed price and planting acres.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I think everyone knows it's probably coming. We don't know the numbers yet, but corn, soybeans, all that is the seed price is going to increase. And alfalfa seed prices, you know, are staying pretty consistent. It seems like, or relative compared to those other. And we were talking every input, every cost counts. If we can save a little bit of money on our seed here, especially when you're putting it over a 5-year out here, probably average, it's going to help your pockets a lot more. So
yeah, certainly a 5-year crop, which alfalfa typically is here in the state of Kansas. The amortized cost of seed is significantly less than a lot of other crops. So, Pat, from a perspective of the dairy and milk production, what opportunities do you see as being made available to us as an industry?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. We're seeing a merger of old school versus new school. When I talk with nutritionists, maybe your vintage, Jerry, that have been in a while.
I'm old.
They fixed alfalfa in diets for just the reason that cows like it and performed well, with not a lot of science behind it. They just was anecdotal, and then they noticed that throughout their career. What we're seeing now is we're getting more and more technical as far as our evaluation of forage inputs and the components thereof. For example, we don't just look at crude protein anymore, we look at amino acids. We don't just look at fiber anymore, we look at the digestibility of that fiber. These models, and I have access to several corporate and some industry models, they're telling the story now also. When we input the attributes of alfalfa, the dairy diets and beef diets come in where alfalfa is actually a very good source of the different components that cattle need. We also look at not just volume of milk anymore, but a lot of it is energy corrected milk, which would take in fat and protein as well. And we've noticed a real increase as far as the demand that cows should have alfalfa in the diet to meet those requirements. And economically, interestingly enough, the economics are actually pretty good when we've got about 1/3 to 50% of the forage base of the cattle diet is coming from alfalfa. And then interestingly enough, so that's a dairy and a little bit of a beef perspective. But I learned this to get me ready for this segment also. But 1/3 of the honey comes from the U.S. It's coming off the alfalfa crop. So it's kind of interesting tidbit that we'll throw out at the coffee table once in a while.
There you go. So, do you see the alfalfa being more favorable in animal diets, maybe displacing a little bit of the distiller's grain that is so prevalent in our part of the world? Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, you're always going to fight, so where we are here in Kansas, the distillers is very economical, right? We don't even have to dry it that much because the truck and they aren't going very far with it. So there's going to be a pressure there, particularly in the beef industry. Not so much with the dairy because we can only feed so much before that rumen gets upset. The beef cattle seem to be able to eat a little bit more in their diets as far as just putting on meat. But I think alfalfa, as we get more and more technical and more health conscious for the animal and environmentally conscious also, alfalfa plays a role there as well. You'll see it come back into those diets and the dairy diets as well.
Okay, great. So just a reminder, July is National Ice Cream Month. So at the end of this segment, go grab you a bowl of ice cream and enjoy that. Lather it with lots of chocolate and strawberries and whatever else you like, but enjoy a bowl of ice cream.
Don't forget the honey.
Joining me is Jeff Hayes, account manager for a number of accounts for FGI, Forage Genetics International, across Colorado and Kansas as well. Forage Genetics International is a company that is wholly owned by Land O'Lakes. And here in Kansas, we are getting a lot of requests about information about carbon sequestration. And it's an important thing to be considering. And Jeff, talk to us a little bit about the importance of alfalfa with that carbon credit and its ability to take care of a lot of carbon in our soils.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry, for having me. So anybody that's been around alfalfa knows that it's an incredible crop in the fact that it pulls carbons from the atmosphere, brings them down into the plant and fixes that, turns it into nitrogen and feeds that plant. And so it's a very, very useful plant in the fact that it can utilize so much carbon. I think as a company, our company's working on trying to figure out exactly how much carbon credits you should get at what stage of the alfalfa growth. It's something that I know Land O'Lakes is putting a lot of money in as the mother company. I know Forage Genetics, we have people on our staff that are very involved in trying to help figure out that formula, because obviously they want it to be fair to the grower that has grown alfalfa to get the proper amount of credits for what they're doing. And also they want to make sure that the corporation or whoever's buying those carbon credits are getting the proper amount of credit. So it's quite a formula from what I understand. I'm not what I consider an expert on it, but we just know that we have a very unique plant in alfalfa for catching those carbon credits.
That we certainly do. I think too that as we consider the carbon credit, that we're getting asked by outside individuals outside of the state of Kansas about the ability to buy carbon credits within the state of Kansas. And so it may be a very important resource for us as we continue forward. Yeah. Well, it's certainly an important topic. It's one that's going to escalate and grow with us, and one we'll stay on top of. But Jeff, we do have the privilege of representing a company that is very much involved in seeking the true value of that.
Yep, they're on the cutting edge of it. They know that they have that the growers out there have a valuable product there to take advantage of helping the whole country as we capture carbon. So
real good.
Hopefully there'll be more to follow with this whole project.
We are believing that will be the case, certainly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.
Thank you for the participation by those that were involved in this last segment. And I'm going to open it up for just a moment, particularly to Kansas Ag. If there's any additional insight or information about carbon credit, what we just talked about here a moment ago. And by that response, I'm going to assume that we're still seeking information. So, and that's fine. I'm going to ask Jake Leal, who is participating in today's session, was also our farm manager, is our farm manager at the Forage Genetics International Research Site there for the Plains location outside of Garden City. If he would expound just a little bit more on the drone technology, and maybe just take us through a scenario of looking at individual plants in our nursery, our salt nurseries especially, and what you might be looking for in the use of the drone technology there. If you would do that, please, Jake, appreciate it.
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. The biggest thing that we're really looking for when it comes to using the drones for our nurseries is the first thing being time saving. When there's 4,300 plants out in each nursery, and we have to physically walk through and take scores on every single one after every cutting, that takes a lot of time. And the drones can fly a little block like that in 15 minutes, and processing should take only about a half hour versus the 2-3 hours it takes us to walk them. Now there are some constraints to that. You know, when we have salt nurseries like that, and we're looking at about 50% debt in it, the analytics can have a hard time discerning which plant is which. You know, when we have 9 plants in a row in a range, and plant 4 and 6 die, sometimes the machine has a little trouble determining which plants died. But between the time saving, we're also looking for consistency across the board. When David or myself go out there and score on these plants, it's you know, what I think is a 9 might be different than what David might think is a 9. So this would, using drones would put everybody, all the notes on the same consistency with itself, so we actually have a baseline for what should be a 5 or a 6. So that's, you know, in research, that's extremely important to have. And aside from those 2 factors that we're looking for the drones, we're really looking at having them fly our yield trials as well, discerning, being able to possibly factor biomass out of it. Obviously, we would still want to take yield on it, but in the potential future, being able to fly a field and pick out a small amount of acreage and determine what the biomass or yield is of it before you even cut it. I mean, that's valuable to us and to producers alike. So there's a big field out there that a lot of potential that we can hopefully harness in the coming years.
Jake, thank you. It's exciting to know that this recent technology is being utilized throughout the ag industry, but in particular now being focused on alfalfa production or research as well. And so we appreciate your effort on that. Jake is a professional licensed operator for drones, and we appreciate the fact that he's part of our team out at the research site. By the way, that research site is taken care of by 2 individuals. There's no other outside help other than the fact that maybe I stop by there and bother them for a little bit, offer to pick up a piece of equipment and operate it for a little bit, but they generally do it all, David Mitzner and Jake Leal, and we appreciate that. It's a premier site. If anybody that's participating in the call today would desire to come out and tour the site, you are welcome to do that. Just get a hold of myself or David or Jake, and we can make that arrangement happen out there too. Any other comments or questions in regard to this segment we just looked at, the changes and opportunities that are in our industry? Okay, I want to go back we spent some time, and I think it was important to do so, about the problems, the challenges that we face, more or less. I guess, Ken, we probably heard a story of doom and gloom. Is that an
Yeah.
accurate assessment?
Yes.
How do we change that? I'm just going to throw this out to the entire group here that's participating today. How do we change that? What can we do to change that? And obviously, part of it is certainly a mindset. Agricultural producers are optimistic. Obviously, we face challenges every day. We are a group of people that are really optimistic. So we've heard the information, and I think it's important that we assess that, that we take that to heart. But how do we now climb over the fence and get on the other side and look at the positive things on that? And this is where I'm asking for your response, and would really desire that you participate here.
Anybody?
Okay, I've put them all to sleep. I'm sorry. No, really, I do value your thoughts, your comments, and I know kind of that I've kind of tossed this out real quickly here, and it is something that deserves a little bit of time and consideration. But I would value any thoughts or ideas in regard to this.
Jerry, I'll jump in. This Jeff Hayes, and you know, we talked about the drought. There's really nothing we can do about rain. It'll come back. We've seen this cycle through these years. You've been doing this a long time. I've been in this business a long time, and these are cycles, and they always go through it. They'll come back. We'll get back to more of our normal rainfall here, hopefully sooner than later. But I really think that for the forage side of it, and especially alfalfa, what we need to concentrate on is what it does for our soils. And if we really start considering, we talked a little bit about carbon credits, and that's great. And I think that's something in the future that's just going to keep growing, and we'll see that becomes more and more valuable as people see the money that they can bring in extra income into their farms. I think that'll play into a factor on what they plant. But I think sometimes we overlook the soil, what alfalfa does to our soil, and the microbials it puts back into it. Obviously, the nitrogen credits that are left there for the following crop. And even if you kind of just, we know that there's a nitrogen of possibly, you know, depending on how long that hay's been, maybe 50 to even 100 pounds, sometimes over that if it hasn't been in a long time, of nitrogen credits. But the other thing is that corn following alfalfa, it's not uncommon to hear 20 bushel increases in yield, maybe even up to 30, just because of what that alfalfa plant has done to that soil by going down that deep taproot, fracturing that hard pan and opening that back up, and then just the way it deteriorates over time and builds back up that soil. So I think that's one of the positives about alfalfa. And I think, you know, years ago when I started in this, almost everybody had some alfalfa in their rotation, you know, and they constantly was just moving crops around, and the yields were extremely good. And obviously with our newer genetics, that's even probably expanded quite a bit because of you know, these newer genetics in corn and what they can yield. So I just want to remind people to think about maybe going back to more of a rotational process and what it does for the soil. And that's kind of my 2 cents, Gary.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think there's a strong consideration out there currently with the economics, the price of fertilizer, the price of alfalfa hay, other input costs and everything, of considering taking the alfalfa stand out perhaps 1 year, possibly more than that, but 1 year earlier than would normally be done to take advantage of those nitrogen credits and utilize those on a corn crop or grain sorghum or forage sorghum crop, and just utilize that I think each individual grower would have to calculate that out, but there is, I think, a strong support for consideration of taking that alfalfa stand out just a little bit earlier than we normally would in regard to that. I'm going to ask Kate, you're a young agriculturalist. You have family that's involved in agricultural production. And I'd like your take on how we can turn and jump over the fence and get on the positive side of what we're experiencing today.
I mean, the positive side, sad to say, but it probably can't get much worse for a little bit.
I like that. We're at the bottom.
We're at the bottom, hopefully. Yeah, you know, I understand inputs are high, especially my husband and I farm, and that's tough when you're starting out and no one wants to, you know, give you credit for anything. But positive side of this is, I mean, I think it's made us all really evaluate profitability on our fields. It's made us evaluate where we're using things, efficiency on using these inputs, and how much we really need to be putting down. So I think it's made us take a different look at that, versus when everything is cheap, you're okay with throwing a little bit of extra stuff at it. So.
Okay, thank you. Other input or comments, perhaps even questions, how we can jump over the fence and get on the positive side of our industry through forage production.
Well, Jerry, I, as far as production is concerned, probably don't have a whole lot to add there, but I think this would be a good time that I would like to say that the Kansas Department of Agriculture supports and has rolled out a website called agstress.org. And so for those folks in agriculture that are having issues or having trouble or, you know, or stressed out, let's face it, it's kind of stressful times. I would like to throw out there that there is a website that they can go to and just read through it, and maybe they can find some help there. And that website is, hang on a minute, I've got it right here, www.kansasagstress.org. So I would suggest, I think that would be a good time to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Anyone else?
Yeah, Jerry, this is Pat. I would just make a comment that you mentioned how we get over the fence. How do we stay optimistic and what's the future look like? And I think one of the, when you look at the input cost, you know, 20, 30 years ago on what we're paid for milk and beef and all that and hay, and you look at, you know, we're paid maybe a little bit more, but nothing compared to what the input costs are. I think our clients, the farmers of America, and probably worldwide, but you know, it's the innovation, it's the technology, it's the looking at new things, but resiliency is the key. And I don't know that we go over the fence. I think the fence keeps moving on us. And what I mean by that is, you know, I truly believe you'll see milk consumption come back. You'll see beef consumption come back. You know, we look at third world countries, and the first thing they do is increase those two things in their diet when they get a little money. We're you know, for all intent and purposes, a little bit spoiled here in the U.S. You know, we have so many different options, and we can go off on and try different things in our diets as humans, and it seems to always cycle back. So rather than look at jumping over the fence, I think we just got to wait for the fence to come back to us, if you will, and we'll be on the right side, build the fence back where it used to be. So that keeps me optimistic. I really believe in what we're doing. You know, Alfalfa is leading. It has quite a lot of technology in it that it didn't have before. And it was a good product before. It's a great product now. And so, you know, wrap that all up. I think we just need to stay optimistic because we're so resilient in agriculture, and the consumer gets a little fickle here and there, but generally come back. So for what that's worth, you know, I still wake up with a smile on my face, glad I'm in agriculture.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate that. I noticed that we have a Canadian that has joined us, Jay Hackney. from northeastern Canada has joined us. He's in the alfalfa industry and services a number of accounts in Canada. Jay, thank you for joining our session this morning. Hopefully you can learn a thing or two about the things that we face here in the state of Kansas. And so appreciate you joining us today. Other comments or questions that might be there? All right. Well, thank you for those things that we've shared here this morning in regards to let's stay optimistic. I don't know that we've really lost optimism, but certainly the focus has been on the opposite side. But stay optimistic. Things will change for the better. And I like Pat's comment. Let's let the fence move back and get on the other side of us. And we maintain where we're at and move forward with that. We're going to move on to the last session. And it's how we as this entire group can work together to facilitate some changes that maybe need to take place, or work together to make our story more known and of an attractive value to others who are not involved in agriculture. And so with that, we'll view the video segment that accompanies this.
So welcoming to our group here this day is Jeff Hayes. Jeff joins us from Eastern Colorado. He services accounts for Forage Genetics International in the state of Kansas as well, and have anticipated your being able to be with us today, Jeff. We're looking at how we as an industry, including the Kansas Ag Department, work together in regards to perhaps working on some of these issues, some of these problems, some of these situations that we have talked about today, how we can work together to perhaps solve them or overcome them. And so we want to start with that thought in mind. And I think probably the biggest issue that we face as an industry for all crops here, particularly in southwest Kansas, is the water issue. It's huge. We have ditch water, some to the west, that is almost non-existent today because of water shortage. The Ogallala aquifer seems to be depleting even more, and as the drought impacts us even more adversely, water amounts these wells are able to pump in today's environment have dropped significantly as well too. So are there some things that we can talk about, that we can consider as an industry that would help overcome that? And obviously we can't make the Ogallala aquifer rise. We can't make the wells pump more water during drought periods. But what are some things that we can do that might offset some of that problem that's occurring within the industry? And so focusing on water availability, how we manage that water, particularly on some of our production crops. Corn is a huge user of water. Alfalfa, to get the highest yield, probably needs about the same amount of water. And so what are some things we can work together on to perhaps manage that water use situation a little bit better than what we're doing today? And so Dave, I'll defer to you for a moment in regards to your thoughts. Are there some things we can consider as an industry?
Going forward, I think, looking at the breeding behind it, the performance of different crops in different environments. There's new technology involving soil moisture probes, monitoring what the soil level is. Timing of the irrigation can be a big factor. There's different usage levels, trying to provide the water when the crop really needs it and not just because the well's on, just trying to focus on the need part of it. But I think from the breeding standpoint, from our side of it, I think we need to be more focused on what we can do to enhance that package going forward.
Kate, your experience with water, is there some water mismanagement that's occurring out there that maybe we could help our producers overcome in regards to watering perhaps at the wrong time, or would you like to address that?
I think a big thing that people
forget is pumping water is not free. The water's there, but no matter what you're using to run your engines, it's not free. It's costing you something. So I think people need to better look at, we don't need the highest yield in every crop. That might not be the most profitable, and that mindset's going to be hard to break, that profitability and high yield is not necessarily the same thing. So I think it's getting that mindset is going to be one thing, which is going to be tough. But it's going to be through researching and establishing, all right, where's our curve in here? Where's our profitability at the highest? Is that, this yield point, or, and it's going to change. It's going to be each farm individual kind of thing. But I think looking at profitability rather than the highest yield and everything is going to be the biggest way to save water.
Okay, good. I agree. Jeff, and working with a lot of our seed distributors throughout the plains here, where do you see help needed to be applied in regards to some of the things we're doing, some of the crop considerations that are out there?
Well, I think for our industry, we really need to educate and to explain to the growers that this crop can be managed where it can be very profitable and help with this whole water situation that we're in right at the moment. I'm, like you said, I'm from Colorado, so we see our reservoirs, and I know you cover some of the same area down the Arkansas Valley River here, that those reservoirs are kind of, some of them at all-time lows.
Yes.
And so what I've been trying to help my accounts with and their growers is, let's take advantage of water and these crops later in the fall. Maybe let's try, and when it's cooling down, let's start trying to build some sub-moisture then. Let's start watering early in the spring and continue to build that sub-moisture. Hopefully we get some help from Mother Nature then. But if we can get that sub-moisture built, and with this alfalfa being such a deep-rooted crop, we can help our yields. And then during that heat of the summer, if we turn off like we are right at the moment, maybe then you just let it, alfalfa has the ability to go dormant. So we let it go dormant, and maybe we take a month or 6 weeks or whatever off until Mother Nature decides it's time again. We get a nice big rain, it wakes up the crop on its own, we get those pivots going again, and maybe we'll pick up another nice cutting. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, the crop does, but that deep root and that deep moisture, I think, is the key.
Okay.
And trying to water when we're not so blazing hot, and take advantage of those cooler days and not so much evaporation.
Certainly, and alfalfa is certainly advantageous in the fact that it will go dormant during those kinds of periods, established alfalfa, and it's important for us to understand that and use it as a management tool. And as we had heard earlier, sharing water between alfalfa and corn, obviously during periods like this, the corn needs the water,
right,
and the alfalfa can handle that situation quite well. Appreciate that. What opportunities, Pat, do you think we could work together as an industry to solve some of these problems? What are some things that we can do in regard to fixing some of the things that are happening?
Sure. Well, Jeff mentioned education, and the more entities we can get involved in telling the story of, in this case, particularly alfalfa, but agriculture in general, of what we're trying to do. What I see, Jerry, as you know, I'm from the Finger Lakes area in New York, and we have a whole set of different issues there, environmentally and growing crops, but it's the same story across the country in that, our clients, the people we work with, they're flat out. I mean, they're busy folks, working really hard. They don't have time to tell the story anymore. Used to be everybody had an uncle that was a farmer and kind of knew the story, but it's with family gatherings. That has gone away. So anytime we can involve the university or different entities just to explain what we're doing, and we get kind of a bad rap a lot of times environmentally, but I have not met another group of people that's more interested in being kind to the environment than agriculture.
True.
Because that's our lifeblood, right?
Yeah.
So anytime that we can just increase the conversation about the good stuff that we are doing, kind of put away some of the miscommunications about what people think we're doing, because I think there's a lot of good work that's already done. It's just a story needs to be told.
Okay. And I think it's important that we understand understand that that messaging needs to come from all segments, including Kansas Ag,
Right.
but certainly from within our industry.
Yes.
That story, that message needs to be told. Kim, you talk to a lot of alfalfa producers, in particular other forage products as well. But what opportunities are there for us to work together in this industry?
Well, I'd have to kind of piggyback on what he's saying, and it's very important to get that education out there. I think as a state agency, we could help maybe along those lines in that promotion and that education. And then I also want to, I guess, give a shameless plug to the Kansas Forage and Grassland Council. They are set up to help educate the public. They're there to help and get this message out. And so I think we need to maybe try and partner with them a little more, utilize them, get folks to be a little bit more interactive with the Kansas Forage and Grassland Council, and as well as NAFA.
Sure.
So, so that would help to get that message out, because we need to get that message out, because it's just not getting out there.
Exactly. And so one of the things that's happened in recent years is that there's a checkoff, alfalfa checkoff. Those dollars that are collected go to the industry, primarily to research, and those activities are cataloged. And we're just now beginning to receive some of the reports back of some of those programs that have been instituted through that program. But there's a lot of dollars that are invested in the alfalfa checkoff, and those are appointed once a year to the various programs that are there in alfalfa research, and we're glad of that. Jake, what comes to mind? You've been involved in research for a number of years now. What comes to mind as being the most needful out there in our industry to move things in a proper and a right direction?
Well, and this kind of ties back into the education part of it, but a lot of growers and producers really need to move along with the innovation. And it's not just drone technology, but things like putting more moisture probes in their fields and analyzing what their water usage actually is. Drones and meters like that can all determine temperature, heat, where the water is, as well as how well the crops are doing. So actually getting that technology out in the field, even though it can be a little costly, it's gotten cheaper over the years. It's not just a research item anymore. These growers can use that, and it would definitely help where we're hurting right now.
Appreciate that. I'd like to thank Mark Lawrence, who's not in this group right now, but thank him for his participation and his involvement in that. David, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate that. Kim, Kate, Jake, Pat, Jeff, on behalf of Kansas Agriculture, thank you for participating and watching. We appreciate your involvement.
So again, appreciate everybody's involvement there. Are there some questions that stem from this last conversation? I think probably the key component of the conversation kind of hit on education, getting the right information in the hands of consumers. And Pat alluded to it earlier in one of the comments that he made, that that young mother with a couple of kids in tow, standing in front of the dairy aisle and just confused as to what's going to be best for her family. And there's all kinds of advertising and campaigns out there that focus on various things, and a lot of them non-agricultural, really. But at any rate, I think certainly education is a component. And in our culture today, that has to be quick and to the point. People are not going to sit down and watch a 20-minute segment and take time to do that. So it has to be very, very pointed, very quick, and address the issue. And We've got some brilliant minds in agriculture that need to be involved in putting those kinds of things together. Something that's catchy. I go back to an iconic phrase, "Where's the beef?" That was to the point and took less than 5 seconds. But that has stuck with me. And it's those kinds of things that I think we need to focus on presenting to the consumer out there. And those things are, I think, highly important in that. Other comments or thoughts or input into this particular segment?
Gary, I might just add that there is such a huge demand in the world for protein, and the United States has the ability to produce a great sources of protein, and alfalfa in its own right is high in protein, obviously soybeans, but milk and dried milk that goes over to these other countries that unfortunately can't grow the products that we can here. So I just think going forward, you're going to see just a continued demand for protein. And I think we can definitely, as an industry, fulfill those needs.
Thank you, Jeff. I see Dale Helwig is participating in the meeting today. He's part of the Kansas Forage and Grassland Council membership and leads our group at this point in time. Dale, do you have any input or any comments in regards to our summit today?
Well, thank you, Jerry. I think this has been a really good informative group, this morning of what the status is at the forage sector across the state. Of course, I'm on the eastern side of the state, Jerry, where we're in a drought too, just not like you. Corn is becoming the new forage, as Kim kind of mentioned earlier. But no, as you guys mentioned, Kansas Forage and Grassland Council, we're an educational group that is trying to get education out, not just to our members, but to everyone in Kansas. So if anybody has any educational topics they would like us to address throughout the state, please reach out to one of us and we'll try to get that done. So, thanks, Jerry.
Good. Thank you, Dale. Appreciate that. Walter Fick, a long time individual that has been in education for Kansas State. We appreciate his leadership in the role of forages for many, many years, and appreciate him. Walt, if you've got any comments, if you're on board, please feel free to chime in at this point in time. Good to see you.
Good morning, Jerry and others. Glad to participate today. Again, emphasis primarily on alfalfa, which is a key forage in our state. I happen to work more with range and pasture, but those are also important forages, and those individuals in parts of the state are under some stress these days too because of the drought, and again, challenges in trying to hold on to their herds is important. Hopefully, we've always encouraged people to have drought plans because we're facing drought right now, but it's going to happen again, and you always need to have, I think, contingency plans how to deal with that when it comes about. Thanks.
Thank you, Walt. Appreciate your input as well too. And any other questions, comments? We'll take a moment or two here. We've still got some time left. We're not going to take every minute of the 2 hours unless questions and comments would fill that, but we certainly want to give you opportunity. All right. If you do have, you can certainly enter it in the chat while we continue on here for just a few moments here. Certainly want to thank David Minster, Jake Leal, our two co-workers who manage the research site there in Garden City for Forage Genetics International. It's a premier research site. very well taken care of, and we appreciate their efforts there and giving us the home for the video shoot that was done. Mark Lawrence, our farm cooperator and tenant cooperator for the ground that we're on, producing alfalfa, both for the dairy and also for feedlots, and appreciate his participation. Pat Berry, our specialist, leaning towards the nutrition side of things. Appreciate his involvement and input in our session today. Jeff Hayes, co-account manager with me, and taking on a lot of responsibility. And Jeff, we appreciate your help there. Kate Wakehamp, young agriculturist. I'm enthused to see young people entering this industry. And Kate, really appreciate the fact that you were a part of our presentation here. Kim Nettleton with Kansas Ag, and trying to keep abreast of the hay market. And I can understand that what you publish on Tuesday is outdated by Wednesday, but it's just one of those things. But you do an awesome job. Thank you for doing that. Robin, for you were behind the scenes, you were behind the camera. You made sure that the sound quality and the pictures were nice, and thank you for doing the video shoot. We really appreciate that. And Kansas Ag for their support, really do appreciate that greatly. Kansas Forage and Grassland Council, very important organization within the state of Kansas, and we appreciate their backing and their support of this endeavor, and again, appreciate all that. Well, thank you so much for your participation. I'm going to turn the program back over to Robin, I believe, at this point in time.
All right, thank you. I think at this time we will take a minute to take a poll. So at Agro Summit in previous years, we have kind of come together and talked about our priorities for the years. And so this poll, I'm going to, there we go. Looks like we've been launched. We'll give you a couple minutes, but we'd like you to choose your top 3 priorities for the feed and forage industry within the coming year. So these are ones that have been listed from previous years, and we'd like you guys to take a minute and let us know if they're still relevant and what your top 3 are. We'll give you a couple minutes for that. Okay, we'll give you just a couple more seconds. Looks like we've got a lot of good answers coming in. We'll give you just about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and end the poll. Thank you all for your input in that, and you should see a pop-up that shows the answers. It looks like, see if I can scroll to read the whole answer here. Enhanced risk management options for forages is number 1. Additional K-State research and extension forage personnel is number 2, and increased funding for research in Kansas is number 3. So thank you all for that input.
I would comment in regards to last year and a half, actually a couple years now, the forage establishment insurance program has been made available in the state of Kansas. It is certainly an option that many of our growers and producers need to consider and input into their operations. It's a very reasonable cost. Has significant payout in case of loss to drought, weather events, basically all peril, similar to what your other crop insurances are. It only applies to the establishment period, the first year of alfalfa seeding, but it's a very good program. Unfortunately, the dates on those are earlier than what we typically plant. So, for instance, this fall, the date that the acres had to be entered into that program was July 31. We're trying to work with NAFA and USDA to maybe change that and get that delayed at least 30 days for the state of Kansas here in that program. But just a comment in regard to that.
Hey, Jerry, do you know why did they pick that cutoff date? Do you know why?
Because the program got started in the upper Midwest and the northern states, and those were dates that were applicable to them. And as they moved into the state of Kansas in particular, obviously those dates are not really good dates for us to work with.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Now you can insure the acres, but if the crop does not get planted, you do not pay the premium. So there is that option, but it's a little bit early in my opinion. All right,
Great.
thank you, Robin.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Kim, anything else before I close out our session today?
No, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody that participated today in this session. I want to thank all of the participants that we interviewed when we went out there in 112-degree heat. And I want to thank you, Robin, for doing the filming. So you rocked it. So, and Jerry, thank you so much for hosting us and for leading our session. I sure appreciate it. So that's all I have.
All right. Well, thank you, Kim, and thank you, everyone. So just want to thank you for your participation today. And a reminder that this session was recorded. So the recording will be available within the next week at agriculture.ks.gov/summit. And I have typed that into the chat here for you. We hope you're planning to join us in Manhattan in person here coming up next week, August 17th and 18th for the Agro Summit. You can register for that at that website I included in the chat as well. And also, before we go, I do also want to highlight that this is the third year for the Kansas Ag Heroes program. We encourage you to submit nominations for any individual, family, or business in the Kansas agriculture that you feel provided a notable contribution to the agriculture industry or their community as a whole this year. So the nomination period is currently open. However, it does close tomorrow. So be thinking about that today. If there is somebody in your community who's made a significant contribution to agriculture in the last year that you would like to recognize, we would encourage you to get that submitted today. So the nomination instructions are at that website as well, or thank you, Dana, for also providing that direct link in the chat. So thank you all, and we hope we see you next week at Summit. Thanks.